So appreciate everybody allocating a few minutes of time to learn about our organization. As Neil referenced, I'm president and CEO of Tantalus Systems. We're based out of just outside of Vancouver in British Columbia, and support electric utilities across the United States, Canada, and the US. As Neil had referenced, we recently, just a little less than a year ago, went public on the Toronto Stock Exchange and trading under their ticker symbol of GRID. At a very high level, we are a pure play smart grid technology company. I'll talk a little bit about what smart grid means, but we are building solutions that are specifically sold to and geared for electric utilities, with the purpose of ultimately helping those utilities truly become more sustainable from an operational and financial perspective, as well as from an environmental point of view. And so a lot of what we're doing drives to not only leveraging and technology to help automate the industrial system of the electric grid that we all rely on every day, but also helping those utilities and organizations improve their environmental, social, and governance initiatives, known as ESG. Our revenue profile is a mix that includes the sale of devices, hardware. From those devices, we access data that feeds into enterprise class software and data analytics, and we wrap that around with some professional services. So about 70% of our revenue today comes from our devices, and over 30%, almost 32% of our revenue comes from software and services. In terms of our team, we're led by Laura Formusa. Laura is among the most accomplished female executives across the North American electric utility industry. She served most recently as CEO of Hydro One, one of the largest utilities in Canada and certainly across North America. We also have Frances Harvey is another independent director that's been part of our team for some time. Dr. Harvey led the Westinghouse utility component within that organization and serves on a variety of boards and is an advisor to a number of large institutions in the US covering the electric utility industry. As I mentioned, we went public about a year ago. We are covered by 5 analysts today and are continuing to build presence in our and awareness of our company. So what we can do is, for those of you who may not be too familiar with the utility industry, thought it might be helpful to just talk about what is unfolding with the electric utilities. Most of us don't think about our electric utility until the power's out or until we receive a bill that doesn't make sense. But fundamentally, there's a lot that happens behind the scenes for those utilities. And most importantly, utilities are truly running into serious challenges today. And we summarize that very simply in that utilities are being asked to support the electrification of everything, including what's otherwise gaining significant attention in the form of electrifying transportation with electric vehicles and electric fleets for cities and for governments. Simultaneously, utilities are being asked to decarbonize what they do and reduce their carbon footprint. And if you think about that dilemma, we're asking utilities to produce more power to ultimately power electric vehicles or other aspects of our daily life and simultaneously reduce their carbon footprint. Well, it's a very challenging dilemma and a very substantial issue, particularly given the electric infrastructure today, again, that we all rely upon. That infrastructure ties back to the design of Thomas Edison over 100 years ago, with the concept of a central source of generation, down transmission lines to a distribution substation, and from substation down to our homes or buildings where you're working today. And so as we think about what has to unfold, there's a substantial amount of attention towards wind and large, clean generation. There's a substantial amount of attention and dollars flowing to transmission, of moving that clean generation and wind from wind or hydro to areas where it's actually consumed. Where Tantalus focuses on trying to help utilities deliver that electricity and simultaneously do it more efficiently is within the distribution grid. And so the way in which we are working towards helping now over 200 utilities deploying our technology today ultimately electrify and decarbonize is by digitizing the grid, meaning taking the distribution grid, again, that's in our neighborhoods and delivering power, and turning it into a digital network of connected devices, very much like an industrial Internet of Things. The way we do that and what we specifically do is we are helping utilities transform from what has otherwise been a model on the left-hand side of this slide, a one-way power flow from point of generation to substation and from substation to where we consume, to the right-hand side, which is a multi-directional grid where power is not only consumed at the home or at a building, but also generated at the very edge, at that home or at that building from rooftop solar, from battery walls, from backup generators, and from electric vehicles, which can be discharged to provide power in addition to consuming. And so we have a heritage and a history of helping 200 utilities migrate from this design of a system from one way to a digital network that can support a two-way system. From there, once we help utilities just actually digitize their grid and start to prepare for the evolution and expansion of where power is coming from and how it's being consumed, we ultimately are helping utilities optimize the performance of their existing infrastructure, the grid. We're enabling them to engage directly with all of us on this call as consumers. We're laying the groundwork and infrastructure and developing the software tools to help utilities prepare and manage for distributed energy resources, meaning solar panels and electric vehicles and battery walls that are being deployed behind the substation where people live and work. And we're, as I'd mentioned, helping them improve their environmental, social, and governance initiatives. How do we actually do that? And what do we actually build and deploy today and sell to utilities? So on the bottom of this slide, you're looking at some of the history of Tantalus. We have a rich history now dating back over 2 decades of actually building out very comprehensive and reliable proprietary and secure communications networks. I referenced the word secure because cybersecurity is becoming that much more relevant for utilities. We've got a rich history in helping them fortify their infrastructure and connect to devices in a secure and proprietary manner. We're communications agnostic, meaning with my mouse, sorry for the crude use of technology, but on the left-hand side of this bottom row, we can help utilities leverage investments that they've made in fiber. And we are seeing utilities deploy fiber not only to the substation, but all the way to the home to deliver broadband services. We've got the devices that help utilities do that. We also can use RF, radio frequency technology, cellular capabilities, WiMAX, whatever is most appropriate and most efficient and effective. We've got the tools to help utilities design, deploy, and then ultimately evolve the communications network based on the needs of their system. At the very end of our communications network, again, sorry for the crude use of the mouse if that's coming across, but you'll see a green circuit board. This is very much like the guts of your iPhone or Android device, cell phone that you rely on every day. What we've done is we've built and designed an edge computing device that fits under the glass of a meter or in a load control switch that turns on and turns off power at electric vehicle charging stations or hot water heaters or air conditioners, an example, or for utilities that have started to automate lighting infrastructure. Our device is a Linux-based computing platform that has RAM and flash memory, and that ultimately accesses data from a variety of different devices that the utility relies on across our communications network, with the idea that that data then feeds into our own enterprise software and data analytics tools. And so the goal of this is ultimately to connect to devices securely, access data from those devices, and then help utilities visualize and predict what's going to happen or what is happening on their grid, with the ultimate goal of helping the utility prioritize where to make investments, where to allocate their team, what to prioritize in terms of their CapEx budgets, in terms of where to generate the highest return on investments that they're making. To that end, as I mentioned at the outset, about 70% of our revenue comes from the sale of our devices. About 30% and growing percentage of our revenue comes from software and services. And we are very closely coupled. We're sort of following the early days of the Microsoft model. Get our devices deployed. Those devices are typically deployed for 12 to 15 years, so it creates a very high barrier to entry for other vendors or competitors. Over that 12 to 15-year relationship with the utility, access data, then we look to monetize that data through software and analytics. And so a few statistics. Today, we capture 30 billion data points on consumption across 200 utilities and 30 billion data points on power quality, current, voltage, and harmonics. All of that data helps the utility understand how our consumption patterns are changing throughout the course of the day, how we consume power relative to weather and changes in the weather in our home, how our consumption patterns are changing if and when we purchase an electric vehicle and seek to charge that at different times of the day. Similarly, through data, we can help utilities understand where they have inefficiencies in their grid, where they have devices that are not operating properly, where they have devices that potentially can fail. Failure leading to an outage, very inconvenient for all of us day to day, or outage and failure tied to explosion and fire. So a lot of our analytics tools are tied to improving performance of assets, maintaining assets, and preventing outages and potential fire risk for utilities, which is at the forefront of utilities' minds, particularly, unfortunately, as we continue to witness fires rage across the western portion of the United States and the Pacific Northwest in particular, that leads to smoke in Canada and ultimately across the United States. So very much focused on getting technology deployed for the utility, accessing data from those devices, and then through software and services and analytics, monetizing that data. Ultimately, why do we exist? It's all geared towards building the sustainable utility of the future. There will be some portions of the population in Canada and the United States that quote unquote go off grid and no longer rely on a utility. But that is a very small portion of the population in Canada and the US. Even as homes require less power because they may have solar panels at their home, they're still going to require reliable power from the utility. So as a result, how are we helping them prepare for that? How do we help them improve their financial performance for stability? How do we help them improve their workforce safety from an operational perspective? How do we help them reduce their carbon footprint by the use of technology, reducing the number of times they have to roll a truck to disconnect someone's power? We can automate that with the push of a button on a keyboard to turn on or turn off power at a home. Those are the types of things that we're working on. And as we look towards the future and think about the introduction of electric vehicles and the impact that'll have on utilities, how do we help them embrace that technology to make their communities more affordable and more attractive to millennials and to businesses that are looking to ultimately establish operations in cities and locations that are more environmentally clean and environmentally safe. From a financial perspective, through Q3 of last year, which is what we've publicly filed, all of our filings are on SEDAR at this point. on a quarterly basis. We have not yet filed Q4 or 2021 annual financials, but you can see we generated just under $25 million of revenue through the first 9 months of 2021. I would reference that we report in US dollars, even though we're traded on the Toronto Stock Exchange. About, as I mentioned, 30-ish%, 31, 32% of our revenue comes from software services. And our blended gross margin across the hardware, the software, and services that we sell today is approximately 45 to 47%, fluctuating quarter to quarter a little bit based on our revenue mix. Despite disruptions from COVID-19 and supply chain constraints that are unfolding, which is really a near-term phenomenon on the shortage of semiconductors and microchip processors, which we rely on in our devices, we've still demonstrated growth year over year. As we look to the future, part of the reason for going public was to strengthen our balance sheet and also position our company to grow not only organically, but through M&A. Our growth strategy is very simple. Add and convert as many utilities as possible each year through our sales channel and our sales force. Get devices deployed at those utilities to access data, monetize that data through software and services. And so as we think about the future and as we think about growth trajectory of this company, we are very active at this point in looking at strategic initiatives to accelerate the software and services that we provide to the utilities based on the data that we're capturing. We'll look to do that organically and through targeted M&A. From our perspective, certainly relative to current share price, we believe this creates a pretty compelling, immediate, and long-term investment thesis. To that end, the investors that we've attracted to the company since going public and raising almost 20 million Canadian dollars, a little more than that, through 2 financings so far, have been funds that take a long-term view on this trajectory of truly transforming the electric utility industry, the way in which they operate, and the way in which they interact with us. The market opportunity is substantial. We believe our solution is extremely differentiated with strong competitive advantage. The best demonstration of that is the number of utilities we add each year. On average, we add 20 new utilities a year through our sales process and through our efforts to market our capabilities into a market segment. Our retention rate of utilities once we secure the account is almost 99%. I think that's validation of the value of our technology, the support we provide to those utilities, and our ability to continue to meet their needs as they evolve over decades. The model is scalable. We are very low from a CapEx perspective. And so as we continue to scale revenue and continue to scale the business, we anticipate seeing strong gross margins and evolving into an EBITDA contribution margin between 15 to 18%. And so with that, we really appreciate, Neil, the opportunity to present and educate this forum on the utility industry, the amount of effort that is required to improve what they do every day to support each of us in terms of our day-to-day, and from there, ultimately creating a compelling investment opportunity for investors. So thanks for having Tantalus.